Hi everyone, I'm Celeste. Welcome to my BookTube channel, A Reader's Almanac with Celeste. And today I thought it would be fun to have a casual chat with you about some of the books that I am going to be enjoying in the month of August. It's hard to believe that we're already in the second half of the summer, because it seems like just yesterday I was introducing my first June book haul and books that I was looking forward to reading this summer. So I am going to share a combination of books with you. Some of the books I've already started, a couple I've actually finished, and then I have lots on my TBR. The first three I'm going to share with you are actually all vintage mysteries. Some of them are golden age, and then some of them go into the late 50s, early 60s. So the first one is The Wheel Spins by Ethel, Lina White. And this book was published, I believe, in 1936, and it was made into a black and white movie by Alfred Hitchcock. The BBC actually also released a film version of this, I want to say 2013 maybe. It had lots of well-known actors and actresses in it, and it was actually quite good. It's one of the few cases where I actually enjoyed the remake better than the original Hitchcock version. And yeah, so The Wheel Spins is a mystery. It is about a girl, well, she's a woman, a young woman named Iris, and Iris is staying in a remote mountain lodge somewhere in Europe in the mountains. I don't believe they ever actually tell you where it is. Maybe they do towards the end. But she's on holiday with a bunch of her young, very boisterous, sometimes rude friends. And as the holiday draws to a close, the friends go back to England, and Iris decides to go back on her own. And Iris is not really a happy camper. She has some issues. She's an orphan. She doesn't really have meaning in life. She feels kind of empty. She's a bit spoiled, a bit petulant, and so she's got a lot of growing up to do, and she is going to board a train, but just as she's about to board the train, she either has sunstroke and faints, or did someone knock her on the back of the head? We don't know. She runs to catch her train and does make it. And she is sort of taken over or accosted by an older woman who's fairly nondescript looking, and her name is Mrs. Froy. And Mrs. Froy wears tweed and has hats and things like that, and sort of chatters on, and she sits with Iris, and Iris is kind of bored by her and has her usual attitude of you know, being annoyed with everybody and everything. And then she falls asleep, and when she comes to, Mrs. Froy is gone. And it's interesting because, low spoiler alert here, no one on the train seems to remember Mrs. Froy. No one can recollect her being there. And so the mystery does go on from there, and Iris and some of her cohorts who she meets on the train have to solve the mystery of what happened to Mrs. Froy. So it's kind of like a locked room mystery, but on a train. The setting is really well described. I would say that Ethel, Lina White really has a talent for writing about her surroundings. I'll just give you a couple examples. Iris was awakened that night as usual by the express screaming through the darkness. Jumping out of bed, she reached the window in time to see it outline the curve of the lake with a fiery wire. As it rattled below the hotel, the golden streak expanded to a string of lighted windows, which, when it passed, snapped together again like the links of a bracelet. I just think that's marvelous. So I really have been enjoying this. Is it my favorite British Library crime classic? No. I will definitely keep reading more Ethel Lina White. I've read some of her short stories, and I'm excited to move on to some others of her works. So that's that one. And then I've been enjoying 2 Persephone books, and the first of those is The Blank Wall by Elizabeth Sanxay Holding. And I already spoke briefly about this in another video, so I won't do a full review here. This was first published in 1947, and it's about a suburban housewife, and her name is Lucia Hawley, and her husband is away in the war in the Pacific Theater, and so she and her father and her son and her daughter are all living together in a house somewhere outside of New York City. I don't think it's exactly clear where it is, but it's near water. So it might be Long Island. The daughter has been writing letters to an older, kind of shady character who she's in love with, she thinks. And so the mother, Lucia, has to protect her. Well, one thing leads to another, everything gets very complicated, and there is a murder which Lucia then tries to cover up. And this is just a marvelous, marvelous book. And it's so different. It's kind of quirky. I made some notes about it here, so forgive me while I look down and read them. It's eccentric, there's strange conversations, there's queer, garish looks from people, odd tones of voice. Something is slightly always off kilter in this world, as though it's kind of like a dream. I love the period details. This book is absolutely full of period details from the 1940s. So there's conversations where they say things like, in New York City, "I'll meet you outside Stern's on 42nd Street." And they describe the diners and the laundromats and the Chinese restaurants and all of that. And it's set in the 1940s, and it's kind of a noir. In fact, this was made into a black and white movie, and I'm really looking forward to watching that. But I will definitely read some more Elizabeth Sanxay Holding, because this was a page turner. I absolutely loved it. If you ever are craving reading the book equivalent of a film noir, like a black and white movie that would come on at 2 a.m., like a Bogart kind of a movie, this is definitely a good one to give a try. The Blank Wall. And then the other Persephone book that I've really loved and just can't rave enough about is The Expendable Man by Dorothy B. Hughes. Love it. Love it. It is for me, a 5 out of 5 stars. It is the story of a medical intern named Dr. Hugh Densmore, and he's from UCLA. He's interning there, and he goes back home to Phoenix, Arizona to attend a family wedding. His sister is getting married, and on the way, a group of teenagers in an old beat-up jalopy are sort of harassing him as they drive through the desert heat and on the way to Phoenix. And he stops at filling stations, and then they'll stop, and then he stops at a diner and they stop, and they're shouting things at him that aren't very nice, and he's very anxious about this. And you don't really quite understand, like, you understand why he would be anxious about that, but why is he so anxious about it? I was starting to get a little bit depressed with it by around page 70. I was like, well, something more has to happen soon, because otherwise is the entire book just going to be about him driving to Phoenix and being anxious? Well, no, because around page 70 or so, you learn more about the story and the characters, and it absolutely just changes and enriches the entire plot and gives it texture and depth. And oh my gosh, is this good. This takes place in 1963 and John F. Kennedy is president. And, you know, it completely takes place in the heat of the desert and the highway and little motels along the way. And you can see the sweat on the glass Coca-Cola bottles, let's put it that way, at the burger joints. So stick with this because it really gets good. It's kind of like if a Perry Mason story and In the Heat of the Night had a baby story, and this was it. It has that gritty feel, and it's just really good. And it really makes you think about things and appreciate things. I can't really say too much without doing a full book review. I will tell you one thing. I will give you a warning. Do not read the afterwords in here. It's written by a very intelligent man who is the head of a film center, I believe, in New York City. But even after I read this, I made kind of a mistake in reading the afterwards, and I would not suggest doing that because even though it's very well written and gives you more information about the story and about Dorothy B. Hughes, it also kind of gives you a spoiler about another of her stories. It kind of tells you what happens in it. And so that was disappointing to me because that was the one by Dorothy B. Hughes that I was going to read next. So I would advise not reading the afterword. Wait till you've read all the Dorothy B. Hughes that you think you will read. I am eager to read more by her. I do understand many people feel that The Expendable Man is her best one, so maybe I've started with the best one and the rest are going to go downhill from there, but oh my gosh, this is impressive. This was such a page turner that I had given myself all of last week just to read this book, and I stayed up Monday night till about 2 in the morning, and I finished it because I just could not put it down. It was like that. So, Dorothy B. Hughes, I'll definitely be looking for more of her work. I also enjoyed The Amazing Mrs. Pollifax by Dorothy Gilman. I first spoke about Dorothy Gilman's Mrs. Pollifax series more than a year ago on my channel and mentioned that when I was growing up, my mother loved these books and used to have stacks of them next to her bed. So I remember these from way back, decades and decades ago. And so I think it was a little more than a year ago I started talking about Mrs. Pollifax, and I decided to continue on with the second book in the series. And so yeah, Emily Pollifax is an older woman, and she has a flowered garden hat, and she's the most unassuming, dear older person. You know, she pours tea for luncheons and volunteers and all of that. She also just happens to be a courier undercover for the CIA. And this particular Mrs. Pollifax adventure takes place mainly in Turkey, and it's full of espionage and intrigue and double agents and this and that. It's just marvelous. And most of this takes place in Turkey, and it's full of espionage and secrets and double dealings. And Mrs. Pollifax has recently become a student of karate, so there may be an opportunity in the story for her to try that out. One of the things I was really happy to see is that some of the characters in this recurred from the first one. We meet some of our old friends, and we meet some new ones along the way. Now, because of the time period that this was written in. It's set in the 60s. You can expect some stereotypes. I believe there's some stereotypes about gypsies and so forth. So that has to be viewed within the context of the time period that it was written in. But all in all, this is a really just fun romp. It's an international spy story with a very unlikely protagonist, and I'm sure you will enjoy this one if you're looking for something kind of light and funny. There were several points where I was just laughing out loud. So yeah, The Amazing Mrs. Pollifax by Dorothy Gilman. So Mrs. Pollifax took place in Istanbul in Turkey, and this book also actually starts out there, and that is Blaming by Elizabeth Taylor. And I love, love, love this watercolor cover. I have been wanting this edition for ages and finally found a copy of it on eBay that was available. So many times they will advertise this cover, and when you get it in the mail, it turns out to be a different edition. I hate it when that happens. But anyway, this was the actual one that I wanted. I have been enjoying this. I will say that so far I am not enjoying it quite as much as the first of her books that I read, and but it's good. It's good. This is about a couple named Amy and Nick, and they are on a sea cruise, and it starts out in Turkey, and Nick is not well. They meet up with another crew member named Martha. Things happen, and Martha and Amy become sort of closer, but Amy questions the relationship. They go back to England. Martha is actually from the United States. They continue to see each other. It's a very quirky book. Not much has been happening. It's kind of about their inner psychological landscapes. But yeah, I don't know. There are moments of Taylor's humor and wit within it, but there are also moments which are sort of depressing, moments of quiet desperation, you might say. But if you like Elizabeth Taylor and you're looking for one of her more somber books, then you may want to give this one a try. And the last book that I'm going to be discussing today is actually a short story collection by the author Katherine Ann Porter, and that is Pale Horse, Pale Rider. And I read the title story. There's 3 long stories in here, but I read Pale Horse, Pale Rider. I thought it was really, really good. It has to do with a woman who works for a newspaper. Her name is Miranda, and her boyfriend, who is a soldier named Adam. And this takes place during the First World War, and it's in 1918 and also a part of the influenza epidemic, the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918. And the story takes place in Denver, Colorado, and it's just really good. It's very stylized. It reminded me a little bit of Virginia Woolf in some ways in terms of the way the story is presented. It's very fever-pitched, almost like dream segments in it, but very descriptive, very evocative. Very stylized. And you know, I've often thought about doing a video on the life, letters, and literature of World War I, and this would be a perfect book to add to that. Let me know if that's something you might be interested in. I actually moderated a group at the public library on the literature of World War I, and it's a subject that's near and dear to my heart. It's a time period I care very much about. I don't know why, but I do. I feel very drawn to the everything from the Gilded Age up through the Edwardians, and also the World War I Great War experience. So yeah, so if you are reading literature from the early 20th century and want to augment it with a long short story, I would recommend Pale Horse, Pale Rider. It's very, very interesting. Yeah, so I'm glad I read that. And that's all I have for today. I've decided actually to split this video up into a part 1 and a part 2 because it is getting incredibly long. And I still have a huge stack of books here in front of me to get through for TBR for August. So we will be here all day if I continue. So I think I am going to save part 2 for another day and leave you with some footage that I filmed earlier today. My son and I decided to go visit the gardens of the George Eastman House and the International Museum of Photography. For those who don't know, George Eastman was a film and photography pioneer, and he founded Eastman Kodak, the famous film company, and helped to make roll film popular. And so the George Eastman House is a gorgeous mansion on East Avenue here in Rochester that was built in 1905. And in addition to being his estate, it also houses the International Museum of Photography. It's a huge film archives. There's a gorgeous movie theater called the Dryden Theater, and famous actors, actresses, and directors come here to Rochester to receive an annual film award. During the summer, it's really fun to go attend the film series at the Dryden Theater because they show all sorts of old black and white movies there, and that's really fun. But for today, my son and I decided to stay outside because it was a beautiful day and the gardens are absolutely exquisite there. So as we finish up the video for today, I hope you will enjoy the gardens of the George Eastman House. And we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.